Hello everyone, it's Marion from Wool Thread Paint again. The blanket is now finished, all but the decoration from these little flowers that I'm wanting to put on this plain area of the blanket. And the way I've decided to do it is not to make it in a regimented pattern, but to scatter them. And I've chosen the idea of scattering them in groups of 3, which I think looks quite nice, but they're fairly random, and I have attempted to make each group of 3 have a different coloured centre in each one. And I thought I would just today show you how I position them and then pin them in place, because these long tails, which we left when we were making the flowers, is the yarn that we're going to use to stitch them on. And it was a fairly simple, it took me just a few minutes to position them, so that's a kind of overview of it. Let me see if I can get it from one side to let you see how they fit along the blanket, and you can do it in any way you like. Right, now my blanket is lying on a bed at the moment, so underneath is a soft surface. Obviously trying to pin through that, just the top blanket is not easy, so what I've done, if I can show you, is I have popped one of my granddaughter's books underneath, and I'll just move it along as I pin each flower in place. So that's quite simple. It gives you something hard to lean against when you're putting in the pin. Now once I get all these pinned into position, I'll be back to show you how I stitch them in place. So I have worked all the way along the blanket and pinned the flowers in position. If I actually lift this up, you'll be able to see them dotted and spotted all the way along the stripe. And the job now is, and they're pinned. Now I used plain pins just to hold mine in position temporarily. You can also, of course, use a stitch marker. It's up to you. I just put the plain pins in because they were to hand and they were quick. But do remember to take them out once you have stitched your flower down. Don't leave any pins in the blanket. Right, I've stitched this one down. This one had a little bit of a wonky petal, which can just get worked into position. And I'm going to stitch this one down next and then work along. Now, once you've got all your flowers pinned in position, you can of course lift the blanket if you want to work it on your lap. But since I've got all this set up, I'm going to leave it on the bed just now. I've put my granddaughter's book underneath again so that the needle doesn't pick up what's underneath the blanket, and I've threaded my long end that was left from the flower onto the blunt tapestry needle. That's why I do want you to leave a long end. I have noted in the pattern how long of an end to leave, but if your end is too short to stitch all the way around, it really doesn't matter too much. You just need to finish it off and start another length to complete the flower. Now we're going to do what's called stab stitch, which is just a little hemming stitch, and it holds it. The beauty of working with yarn is that everything pulls together really nicely and neatly, and so it's quite easy to stitch it in position. I've actually lifted the pin out of this one just now, but that doesn't really matter. Now where you have got your the yarn end, we're going to, it's sitting in the flower at the moment obviously, so I'm going to spear a little bit of the blanket and pick that up with the needle and move on. Now, I'm not saying that you need to put hundreds of little stitches all the way around the flower to hold it in position. Probably 2 or 3 on each petal will be enough. So I have picked up on the blanket and I've come back through on the edge of the petal. I'm going to not travel in any direction. I'm going to go straight across and pick up another wee stitch and then move along the petal again. So I'm coming out through the petal and into the blanket and back out into the petal again. And give it a nice firm tug. Now we're going to work all the way around, doing as many stitches as you see fit. As I say, it holds very neatly without too many stitches. And just make sure that the stitch that's on the top is nice and small and sitting at right angles to the petal so that it doesn't show much on the front. Obviously, the blanket has a few spaces or holes in it, so you have to just take your time to find, oops, I put something up there, find a bit of the blanket that's not a space, obviously, and so on. And I'm going to jump around to this bit. Up. And I'll continue all the way around to where I started, and then you can finish off on the back of the blanket, or if you want to just run your last stitch through the flower. I'll see if I can zip round that to show you. There will be a few stitches showing on the back, but since this is a blanket for a bed and the back won't be seen, I don't think that makes a lot of difference. So I've turned myself slightly to do the last few bits of the stitching. This is a funny bit. You have to jump around to find the easiest angle to stitch the last petal at. I love the way that it sits just a little bit proud, so it really draws the eye to this part. It's just ever so slightly more, makes it just a little bit more interesting. So I'm going into this corner and out through petal. I think this would be infinitely better sitting on your lap doing it than standing up as I am. But anyway, we are back to where we started, and as I say, you need to do a little double stitch just to firm off the end of the yarn there. There's that one is now attached, and what you can do is run it through the back and then pick it up on the other side, do a quick double stitch. Just to finish off, and that will hold it nice and firmly. So there we are, and so now the task is just to work along. That took me about 2 or 3 minutes to do that, so it won't take long to work all the way along the blanket, and that will be the flower section finished.